Hey there, and welcome to another Change Catalyst conversation where we talk about anything and everything that has to do with building cohesive, vision-driven teams that make sustainable change happen, even when change seems impossible. I'm Casey Watts, Impact Coach and Consultant, and the host of this show. What I know from experience is that making change happen can be overwhelming and downright hard. Sometimes as an instructional leader, you survey your organization from a bird's eye view, and it can seem as though you're witnessing an anthill that's been knocked down and ants are scattering everywhere. No one has a collective understanding of why change should happen or what change to begin first. You notice false starts again and again because a solid action plan hasn't been crafted, or you're met with resistance because you don't know how to motivate such complex people. The thing about ants, though, is that they have one common goal, and that is to collectively rebuild one solid anthill. But this doesn't always happen for schools. You see, we can say as much as we want that Tier 1 instruction needs to happen, or that a curriculum needs to be implemented with fidelity, or that PLCs need to be collaborative and support student learning. But these broad, ambiguous goals do nothing to help teachers and staff build capacity and actually make change happen. And that leads to schools remaining in a cycle of stagnancy, experiencing the same problems and ineffectively repeating the same initiatives again and again. This leads to low morale, burnout, high turnover, and it leaves our students to suffer most. But if instructional leaders can get really clear on a narrowed instructional focus and script the critical moves for people, then we can make collective efficacy, a united colony of educators, if you will, possible. My goal is to make cohesive, vision-driven school teams a possibility. I help school leaders zoom out to cast vision and then zoom back in to script critical moves that help teams collectively go farther, faster, and better, even when change seems impossible. One way I do this is by coaching leaders through the Clarity Cycle framework, a cycle for building sustainable capacity through intentional clarity processes. Are you ready to feel great about exactly where you and your campus are headed? And are you ready to know exactly how you're going to get there? If so, you're going to want to stop right now and head to catchingupwithcasey.com to learn more about the Clarity Cycle framework, and then come back to catch up on this episode. It'll still be here when you get back. Okay, now that you are primed for thinking about cohesive, vision-driven teams that make change happen, let's jump into this week's Change Catalyst conversation. Hey, everybody. Welcome to, I can't believe it, but it is episode 43 of Change Catalyst Conversations. And I am pumped tonight to have my dear guest, Cory Camp, joining us to share about blended PLCs and teams. So I want to know in the comments, if you are here with us, let us know who you are, where you're from, what your role is, and what brings you to this episode specifically. Let us know where you are, where your school is with PLCs in the moment, and where you're headed maybe in the year to come. Because I'm betting that wherever that is, whatever Cory has to share with us tonight is going to benefit you greatly. So Cory, welcome to the show. I'm super excited you're here.
Thanks, Casey. It's so excited to be on the show. I'm a big fan of your show and have been catching up on some episodes here this summer as things have slowed down for me, and it's neat to be on the other side. So thanks for having me.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go ahead and jump into who you are, Cory, and tell us what it is that brings you to this content specifically.
Yeah. So I am an educator, though I never imagined education was going to be my passion. I thought it was going to be something in the realm of art and psychology. Luckily, I get to create and help people through the psychology of change and behaviors every single day as an instructional coach and an instructional leader. So all of the, undergraduate work that I did in art and psychology applies daily to my life. I have my master's in education, fell in love with teaching probably in the middle of getting my undergraduate. I was doing some subbing positions. I actually started substitute teaching when I was 18. Back in the day, there were less rules.
Okay, I have to know,
18.
when you started subbing at 18, what grade levels were you subbing in?
The first day, you want to know where I subbed? I subbed 9th grade for my former psychology teacher at 18. So like kids that I knew, even had a like ex-boyfriend in one of the classes because I dated him when he was a year younger than me. It was in my hometown. So it's a crazy long story how I got into that. Multiple times I was like, teaching, I could never do that. Dealing with students like me, because I was a bit of a smart aleck, underachiever in high school. I knew how to work the system really well, which was frustrating, I'm sure, to many of my teachers. And I had a teacher who asked me, she's like, I'm going on maternity leave. I'll be teaching 6th and 7th grade. And you know how my classroom runs, having been a tutor in the classroom, which was not a class I asked for, but one I was put into. And she said, could you stay back a semester from college and be my long-term sub? And I was like, that's crazy. Don't you need like all kinds of schooling? And she was like, actually, no, you just need a diploma, which you'll have. So yeah. I turned 19 when I was doing that long-term sub position and enjoyed the gig so much. I thought when I go to college, I'm going to intentionally stack my classes so that I have 1 or 2 days of no classes to be able to like sub. It's an easy job. Who says subbing is an easy job? Right. I thought it was.
Right.
But yeah, when I graduated and I was looking at graduate school to become a counselor and an art therapist, I thought, I really loved being in the classroom. I took another semester off in the middle of college to do a long-term 5th grade science position and fell in love with that. So yeah, I tried this before I had kids. Now that I have kids, I think I could go back and do like the younger grade levels. But I tried before I did that first long-term sub position, kindergarten. I thought it'd be super fun. Got in my car at the end of the day and like burst into tears. And I swear I was still counting heads like for days. Like I was so scared I was going to lose a little one. And there was so much like snot on my pants from like kids just like hugging you full on snot face.
And it's different when it's someone else's kid's snot.
Yeah.
Exactly. Snot is one thing.
A little more gross factor. Yeah. So no, but it has truly become my passion. Another experience that brought me into education when I was in college is working with a young man with autism, and he loved to draw. So I worked with him on communication skills through drawing. We would just sit together for hours each week and draw and talk and building those communication skills, like maintaining eye contact. And he went to the same school that I was a long-term sub for that 5th grade science class. And so my actual first experience with a PLC was going to his teacher's PLC to talk about the strategies I was using at home that were so successful and how that might look in the classroom, since I knew several of the teachers and knew the students so well, and kind of training them a little bit on how they can build those skills within a new setting for him. Because at home it was well and working, but at school it wasn't. So I became a special educator after that, with this huge passion for advocating for students. And then in that work, I had a choice to either get really frustrated with the lack of knowledge and understanding and skill especially my gen ed peers had with working with my students, who were their students as well, but there was a bit of a silo there, or I could do something about it. And so I was kind of slung shot out of the classroom and into leadership. And now my passion is all around the teacher learning experience and advocating for our teachers in the classroom, because we can't change student learning until we change teacher learning. So that's where I've been for the last oh my gosh, decade and some change,
Yeah.
has been instructional coaching and professional learning design and all the fun things.
Yeah, that's
So,
awesome. And so now
yeah.
you work with SIBME. Is that
I
right?
do, yeah. So my day job is I'm the director of professional learning for Sydney. It's a fancy title. You know how titles are. Like it doesn't always explain exactly what you do.
Mhm.
Basically, I help schools design professional learning for teachers using innovative technologies like the Sydney platform. The Sydney platform allows you to, it's not really an LMS, but you can think of it in that frame. That's sometimes
Right.
helpful for people, but for educators. So
Yeah.
it's designed to help you easily capture artifacts, whether that's video or pictures of student learning or things that are happening in the classroom, and share those for the bigger purposes of reflection and collaboration. And
Mhm.
so I fell in love with it, used it to run some virtual blended PLCs and to coach some co-teachers. And when I was a regional specialist down in Texas, and then when I moved up to Ohio about 5 years ago, our family relocated to Ohio, and
Wow.
I started working full time for Sydney. So
Yeah, that's a big jump, Texas to Ohio.
it is. It is. It was a huge change. My husband's from here, and I'll tell you, Casey, when he proposed to me, he was stationed down in Texas. That's how we met. And I said, like as soon as he asked me, and I realized he was legitimately asking me to marry him, I said, I'm never leaving Texas.
Yeah.
And he was like, it's okay. I don't ever want to go back to Ohio. We both ate crow on that one because here we are, loving Ohio,
Yeah.
missing Texas, but I actually like the snow. I don't have to drive in it because most of my work's virtual.
That's
So
true. That makes a huge
it
difference.
makes a huge difference. I can look at it. I also
Yeah.
just refuse to learn how to drive in the snow. That
Right.
helps too. So,
Yeah. For sure. So I kind
yeah.
of want to segue into our topic
Mhm.
by using what you just said, like you're refusing to learn how
Mm,
to do something. And I think sometimes when we're talking about or thinking about PLCs, there's almost this refusal of moving into PLCs because I think people see it as just one way of doing things. But
mhm.
we know that PLCs is not a thing necessarily that you do, it is something that you are. So it's a professional
Mhm.
learning community. And I want to say that we've probably gotten into this mindset just in general that PLC means it's like a meeting and something that you do and it's
Yeah.
weekly and all of these things. But there are a variety of ways that you can work within a professional learning community. So I
Mhm.
want to ask you specifically about blended PLCs. Can you tell us a little bit about, first of all, what you believe about PLCs and teams, and then what blended PLCs means?
Yeah. So, I love what you just said, that it's not PLCs are who we are, right? Like we are a community. And it's always a loaded response, I would say, when I'm consulting with a school and they say, "Oh, we have PLCs." And I'm like, "Tell me more."
Yep.
Because a lot of times it's a weekly or biweekly meeting
Mhm.
for housekeeping where a team comes together. They're not necessarily, they're usually by grade or content area, not necessarily by interest. And not a lot of learning actually happens in that community of people. There's not even really much of a sense of community in that. So, I truly believe that in many places, PLC gets a bad rap, or is kind of falls into this rut that becomes this just kind of another meeting that we go to. It's a meeting about meetings sometimes, and it doesn't actually result in any change,
Yep.
to making change happen. And regardless of however you choose to do that, whether there's multiple modalities for that, there's coaching, there's PLCs, there's mentoring, there's all of these different professional learning models that we can employ. And I loved your intro as you talked about how we've got these big goals, and sometimes those big goals are matched with really effective, sometimes mystical strategies, and
Mhm.
then really hollow follow through. And that's what I find with PLCs is it's more governed by the fact that we have a common grade level or content area, and curriculum is sometimes talked about, but not like the practice and the strategies and
Absolutely.
a focus on change. So I really believe that we have to shake some things up, and that a PLC has to become more than just that day that you meet. It can't just be thought of as this bricks and mortar experience.
Yeah.
And that's where the blended piece comes in. So when my last 2 years in the classroom, I started employing a blended learning approach with my students. And for those who don't know kind of more of a formal definition of blended learning, it's your bricks and mortar, and it is an online piece. And those two components, those two modalities or dimensions even, are designed in a way, they're intentionally designed. It's not just happenstance. It's not just, we didn't get a chance to go over these questions, so do them for homework, and a way to kind of just keep pace going. They're intentionally designed around what's most important to happen when we come in this under the same roof together, and then what is the most valuable experience for them to do independently and online. And so I have taken that approach into a lot of my professional learning, because a lot of professional learning just happens to us. And we can let it just happen to us. We can let it just be that Wednesday afternoon PLC, or we can start to kind of change that responsibility and that experience to one that creates more agency and engagement and ownership and change. So that's kind of I've got a visual that we'll take a look at here in a bit, but it's really that applying that blended learning theory, that approach to our adult learning and our PLCs.
I love it. Guys, if you are here with us live, I want you to put in the comments something that is resonating with you right now. One of the things that you said, Cory, was it's not just by like happenstance. So guys, we can create a hashtag no happenstance or not by happenstance, because everything that we do, regardless of your approach to PLCs, it has to be super intentional. And as soon as we lose clarity around what is intentional and why we're doing what we're doing, then we can consider our PLCs stagnant and lackluster, and we don't want that. So tell us a little bit about, if you were going to approach telling someone about how to implement blended PLCs, what does it look like?
Yeah, so I just described blended learning as kind of this like two-dimensional piece. You've got your bricks and mortar, and then you've got your online. In the pandemic, my depth and my kind of mental model of blended learning began to really shift, especially given a lot of my work prior to the pandemic virtually, to kind of 4 dimensions. And I wish I had a visual for y'all for this, but imagine for me, you've got your online and you've got your offline. And so bricks and mortar doesn't necessarily have to be how your PLC happens. You might have people who are spread across the district, or maybe you've got a PLC that's not tied to your district or your campus.
Yes, absolutely.
But you've got your synchronous, like we are right now during this live session, and you've got your asynchronous, which is independent piece, right? And then you've got your online, which we are synchronous and online, and you've got your offline. And if you think about those 4 dimensions, and then the experience and the learning and the change pieces that can happen as you design, then you might be able to start to think differently about the different activities, right? So it doesn't all have to be confined to Wednesday after school.
Right.
There are some things that can happen independently, or maybe online or offline, that can help kind of create that whatever change, whatever goal, whatever focus you're having. So keeping that in mind, I've got a visual for you of just kind of a common cycle. And so we're going to start at kind of like the top of the hour. Number 1, learn and discover. And a side note, you may not start with learn and discover. You don't have to go all the way through the 4 steps of this cycle. And you can also jump from one step to another, or kind of stay between 2. But let's just imagine that you are working with, I'm going to use a different analogy than I usually do. Let's go with math tonight. See how well I carry this one through, because I'm an ELA person. But let's say your math team is, interested in learning about the math language routines. There's 8 of them. And so maybe the learn and discover piece, which can be done asynchronously. I actually like for it to be a little front loading, done asynchronously. So maybe this is sharing out an example, a model video of a specific math language routine, or an article of the 8 math language routines and the power of them. You're sharing one or more artifacts. Maybe, let me just go back to my standard mode of ELA. Maybe you're looking at some alternatives to round robin reading, and you share 3 different alternatives. The idea here is that there's some exploration that can happen, and this can happen asynchronously and independently. So people take some time to view that. Videos are super powerful for this, because again, sometimes these really effective strategies can seem very mystical, but having something that's kind of written down, a great article, a great read, a good TikTok, it can be a number of things. The idea here, though, is that you are sharing this so every team member has this expectation of reviewing that and responding to something. Maybe you've got a Padlet and they go and put in what they thought about the 3 TikToks that you shared around, the math language routines, or there's a discussion board. Maybe you're using your Schoology, or I love to do this in Sydney because then they can comment directly on the video or directly on the article at the key moments that kind of caught their attention or caused questions. Here's what I love about this intentionality piece. I want to keep bringing you back to, like, how do we design with intention? Is because I am front loading some of this learn and discovery process, it gives more time for all of the team members to, one, process and share their thinking with me, so I can use their thoughts to better design our team meetings so it's really effective and meaningful. But also, if they want to dive deeper, they've got some more time for that. If they're really short on time, maybe they're just going in with just a focus to leave one question and one idea. It's kind of there for people to take at their own pace. They can read and reread, or watch and rewatch. But the key here is that they are responding in some kind of shared fashion, so that they can kind of have some group thinking happen. And then you can also use that to help mold that team meeting agenda. So you've got your asynchronous. Any questions, Casey, about that? I'm looking over here.
No, I'm actually really loving it. I'm actually about to take some notes just so I remember some things that I want to bring up later. But one of the things that I was thinking is how already, we're only in this first piece of this process, and already I'm thinking about how individualized it is for teachers. And how imperative that is if you are going to collectively pull people together and move them forward. So this is awesome. Yes, keep going.
Yeah. So, and again, I always like to share these with, not just like hey, watch these 3 TikToks, but like, all right, so you said we want to focus on XYZ. We want to get more rigor in our classrooms. That's our goal as a PLC. I found these 3 strategies I think will work. As you watch them or as you read, I want you to respond. So you're going to create a prompt, at least one prompt for people to have some kind of shared response to. That also helps take a little bit of the cognitive load off of your teachers, especially those who maybe are a little bit newer to this learning on their own process, right? They're used to being pulled into a room and PD happening to them. This is a little bit more active approach. So we'll talk a little bit later about some, things that you might consider if you decide to get some of this up and going.
Yeah, awesome.
So maybe this takes place over a week, maybe it's a few days, but key here, keep it pretty short and sweet so that they have the time to do it. It shouldn't feel like a college course. Then you have your team meeting, which is something that many of us have. If you've got PLCs or if you've got teams, you've got a shared meeting time somewhere in your schedule. And so during this face-to-face synchronous time, could be via a meeting tool, maybe you're recording part of it because someone's missing, but this is the time to come to some common understanding. So you're reviewing people's responses here, not everybody's at once. Like maybe, hopefully you've used a tool where you can kind of chat back and forth. And if someone's got a burning question, you could have answered it in the previous week during the learn and discover period. But here you're just kind of saying, I noticed that there were several comments about this, and this. Maybe you have prepared another example for them because they're like, this looks great, but what would this look like with their students, right? So maybe you've used that to plan a little bit further ahead, or you've dug in a little bit more deeply and done some more kind of researching for the team. You're asking questions, you're helping clarify, you're coming to some common understandings as a group. So you're just kind of bringing everything together. This also honors the responses that they left during that kind of asynchronous learn and discover piece. You know, it's akin to if we give homework or if we're doing some kind of small group collaborative work, you don't just like, okay, that's over and move on to the next thing. You kind of have a quick moment just to kind of share some ideas. Anybody have any questions about the homework? Going over this important one, and then we move into the next piece, right?
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing I loved about this, and I imagine a lot of our viewers probably have this common experience either themselves or of the PLCs that they run. I know I did. I had this experience where I would get great ideas in my PLCs and in other PD sessions, but I just never had the support or the time carved out to create an action plan and then follow through on that, right? That hollow follow through is an issue, right, within professional learning. So here, because we front loaded the processing and a little bit of that conversation, we get to help create action plans. And these should be individualized. So maybe I share, you know, there's 3 alternatives to round robin reading. And now I'm challenging everyone in the PLC to choose one, either one of the 3 or a different one that maybe you found along the way, and create a plan for how you're going to implement that this week. What's your actual action plan for doing it? And what are maybe going to be some of the success criteria you would look for? So if I do this, I'm hoping I get this outcome, all of those things. I'm helping them create those deep plans. And this is, again, should be reasonable, actionable, something that they can put into place pretty quickly.
Yeah. And what a great way, if you are an instructional coach, or even I'm going to say principal too, because I believe principals really should take on a coaching role as well. But what a great way to get started into a coaching cycle. Like that is just a natural segue into a coaching cycle with teachers. That's awesome.
Yeah. So this is where, you know, I often get the question about, you know, if we're doing this blended approach, is this best for like weekly PLCs and so on? I prefer in my coaching and in my team facilitation to have like an every other week kind of schedule. Often I will tell the people I'm coaching or the members of the team to still like block 3:30 on Wednesdays, every Wednesday. Make sure you have some time dedicated in case you don't get to it the rest of the week. But we're only going to come together every other week, right? So this just gives more time for the application piece, right? Which is often, in many of my experiences, both as a teacher and a facilitator in teams and PLCs, this is the part we don't always get to because we don't have the time to create the plan, right? So let's move to stage 3, which is the apply, reflect, and share. 2 important pieces here, reflect and share. We don't always prioritize that, and that closes the loop with our professional learning. So if I just am letting professional learning kind of happen to me and hoping through osmosis something sticks and something changes, it doesn't always work. Typically, it's that reflection, it's that action of reflection that can help me really start to change behavior, not just practice, but truly make it a change in my behavior. And then I should be sharing that out because we're a team, we're a learning community. So I should be sharing my journey and I should be a part of your journey, and we're here together. So this piece is another asynchronous piece. It happens on your own. And this is where you're implementing those action plans. Maybe I'm doing it alongside with a coach because I'm like, I really want to try this. I don't know how this is going to look. I'm a newer teacher. coach, could you co-teach this with me? Or I'm going to try this and it's just a very small kind of, I'm just going to take suggestions from students to get more student voice in my classroom, whatever it might be. But this is where we're implementing it. But during that implementation, we are collecting an artifact of it. So maybe I'm snapping a picture, maybe scary, but so powerful, I'm recording it. And so I can go back, because usually when we do something new, it's really hard to reflect about it because we are often like in our head and present in the moment. And it's difficult to sit back and reflect on how that went. So I always recommend that we try to record these. You don't have to share the recordings with anybody, but just so you can go back and kind of look with a more present eye instead of trying to remember what was happening as you were changing up the plan in the middle of the plan and managing all the things. So finding some way to kind of document it. So maybe my success criteria guides this. You know, my students are going to have more robust answers, or they're going to, I'm going to have better engagement during the shared reading time if I don't use the round robin. And so how do I kind of capture that? And so maybe that's a part of the implementation plan we create in the team meeting. And then there's a moment of reflection where I'm reviewing my artifacts and I'm thinking, did it work? Did it fit? Would I do it again? If I did, how would I change it? And I'm sharing those reflections and maybe even the artifacts in a team space. So again, for me, this is in me because we've got a shared huddle. Everything is private within the team in PLC, and we can all share and comment. But it could be a Padlet, it could be a Google Classroom, a Schoology, another space, any kind of shared team space.
Yeah, and I want to put a plug here for Marco Polo. You can use Marco Polo too and have your own little groups to share some different things. Now, obviously, you probably can't record what's going on in the classroom, but it could be a great place to share what your action plan was, what you implemented, get some feedback on it. It's a great way to reflect. Yeah, lots of spaces you can utilize.
Yeah. And this is also another way to kind of live vicariously. Like maybe I had a plan and I thought it was a pretty good plan. Hopefully I did. And I'm applying it, but then I'm also checking out Casey's plan and seeing how that worked for her. And we're pretty similar teachers. And so my plan maybe bombed, but Casey's worked. So maybe I want to give myself some space before I try my plan again, but I want to try Casey's because she had mad results with it.
Yeah.
Or, you know, maybe it's we both did the exact same strategy and we just varied in delivery. And so maybe I want to change a little bit that. So there's, again, this shared element here. And this is what I believe truly a PLC is. We are in the midst of learning and changing together, and we are in a shared journey. And so making sure that we are making that visible. So yes, if you are recording, you want to make sure that you're using a platform that is safe and secure. You got to remember FERPA and COPPA compliance.
Yeah.
But if you've got something that helps you do that, like Sydney or another platform, it is so powerful.
Absolutely.
All right. So we've had a chance, maybe it's been a week or two, and we've applied all of our plans, and we've been sharing our journey along the way. Maybe we're trying again and like tweaking it. Maybe it was just one and done, and that's okay. I did something compared to maybe what I would have done last year.
Yeah.
And so the next team meeting is a chance to review reflections, right? Like, so as the facilitator, as the coach of this team, I'm watching and supporting throughout that apply, reflect, and share, but I'm also thinking about what's the conversation? What can I pull out? What can I highlight so I can help build collective efficacy, which, by the way, this entire process supports. And what can I use? Who can I maybe bring up in a leadership role to share their experience, maybe live, during the team meeting? So I'm really kind of thinking about designing a really strong, solid, not just reflection at this point, but reflection for action, right? For thinking about the future. And so again, we're coming to common understandings, and I may be having a chance to say, okay, Casey, we did the same strategy. You had a different I feel like our students are pretty similar. So what was different in your delivery? Like share your plan with me, share something, but we're having a chance to maybe even break out in smaller groups and have some conversation. You should really feel a buzz during this team meeting, because now we've had a chance to like all come back together live and kind of talk about our learning.
Yeah.
And then here we can go one of two directions. Usually it's determining next steps, and I'm kind of going back and forth between 3 and 4. Sometimes we maybe need to learn another strategy. Maybe we're focusing on the math language routines, and so I bring 2 more strategies for everyone, 2 more language routines for everyone to check out and decide, do you want to keep going with your previous plan? Do you want to try something new? Or we create another action plan around that next step, that next tweak that I might do with my plan, or steal somebody else's action plan and try it in my own classroom.
Mm-hmm.
So you go kind of back and forth between 3 and 4 until you've kind of reached your goal for that purpose of this kind of learning experience. And when you're ready to, as a PLC, to move on to a different topic, strategy, focus, you start back at learn and discover and kind of keep going. So yeah, that's my kind of blended approach to teams and PLCs, really thinking about how can I make sure that the PLC stays front of mind and together, even when we aren't together in so-and-so's classroom.
Yeah. So. Okay. Oh my gosh. I love this so much for several different reasons, but it is individualized, highly individualized to meet not only teachers' needs, but students' needs as well, because we're focused on each teacher's individual classrooms and their instructional practices within that classroom. But then I really also love the possibilities that it makes possibilities that are possible. You get what I'm saying, right?
Like so much possibility.
Yeah, it's full of possibilities. Like it's not so structured that it becomes stagnant. It gives a little bit of flexibility, and it allows for people to use their time really wisely. And that's one thing that I hear all the time is we don't have time. Or when they think about PLCs, teachers or any staff members really may think about it being a time sink because they're going and they're not getting fulfilled by it. It's not bringing life into them. It's not bringing life into their classroom.
They're hearing that thing that could have been in an email, right? None of this could be in an email, y'all, right?
Exactly.
So like that's a huge piece.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So I'm going to remove this from the screen if that's okay. And guys, as we start to close up, I really want you in the chat to jot what was most useful for you in this conversation with Cory. She brought so much great content about blended teams and PLCs. And I hope that you are thinking about a next step for yourself. So put in the chat what was most useful, and also maybe put in the chat what is your first next step, like what's something you're going to take away from this and implement next year. So Cory, I want us to end with you sharing like where, if someone was going to start this, like if they were going to start their journey tomorrow with blended teams and PLCs, what would you say needs to be the first thing they either need to do or think about?
So I think there's 2 first things. There's the logistical first thing. Where are we going to share? Where is going to happen? And I really like a mode that allows us to share easily from like my smartphone, take a picture, share it right to the Padlet, the group, the whatever.
Yeah.
So make sure that that's super accessible. Having the ability to like chat within it is really nice, especially the ability to like comment on each other's shared artifacts. So that's one. What's your vehicle for this when you're not in person? Because the big part of this is not in person.
Right.
And then 2 is the thing that you will struggle with as you get started with this is just retraining your team members, your PLC members into becoming learners that are active, that are applying their learning and not just soaking it up like a sponge, but then it just dries up before we get to use it, right? So thinking about how will you set norms and how will you maintain those norms, and help your teachers, your members, find, make, and prioritize the time, and keep that going. So that would be I know you said one, but I feel like there's the behavioral piece of this that is not common to how we typically PLC and do any kind of learning. And then there's the logistical part.
Yeah. And that kind of makes me think too, if you are especially moving into a new school year, if you're thinking about implementing something like blended PLCs and teams, or you're just thinking about PLCs in general, there are some foundational things that need to be considered for any mode that you choose, any format that you choose for PLCs, no matter what the experts say, no matter if you're going to Solution Tree or looking at PLC Plus, wonderful, wonderful content, but you still have to really think about the foundation that is either already there or the foundation that needs to be built. And with that said, I am starting on July 14th, which is next Friday, I believe, a PLC Reset Sharecast on Marco Polo, where I give you 4 tips and strategies for either resetting your PLCs for the new school year or starting them from scratch. So if you've not ever done had PLCs in your school, this could be like starting with blended PLCs and teams could be the way to go. But I'm going to say you need a foundation first. And I tell you all about that in this Sharecast. Okay, Cory, I so enjoyed this conversation. Where can people find you?
Well, I am newer to Instagram and I've been putting a lot of my energy there. So I would love some more followers on Instagram. You can find me at Cory, that's Cory, Camp Coaching. And check me out there.
Yeah. Awesome. I'm putting that in the chat, guys, and it will be in the show notes for those of you who want to listen to this again. It'll be on YouTube. It'll be on Spotify. It will be on iTunes. It's in all of the places. Okay. Until next time, Cory, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's so great, especially Elena. I saw that you're from San Marcos, Texas. So fun. Lived there for many years. So
fun. Right. Okay. We have more conversations, Cory. Like this is not the only one. We're gonna have another. Okay.
I love it. Okay.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye, y'all.
Hey guys, I want to give a huge shout out to you for tuning into today's Change Catalyst conversation. I would love for you to do me 2 solid favors. Number 1, if you have enjoyed this or any other Change Catalyst conversation, do me a favor and hit subscribe. I've got a lot of great content and guests coming up and I don't want you to miss any of it. Number 2, if you are thinking of a friend or colleague who could benefit from this show, share it with them. The only way to make change happen is through a multiplier effect. And you can be a multiplier by sharing this show. Until next time, I want you to go off and do the great things that change catalysts do.